special envoys are in Yemen to seek ceasefire and push for peace. The joint forces uncover new Houthi minefield to the south of Hodeidah. Houthi rebels continue to recruit children and send them to war fronts. Welcome to Yemen Today TV. This is the English news with me, Shaza Abdelbay. In a very unusual moment, the United Nations and the American envoys are in Yemen to seek ceasefire and push for peace. This comes amid intensive Houthi escalation in Ma'rib and a dire humanitarian situation. More on the story is within this report.
Amid the intense battles in south and west of Ma'rib Governorate, the United Nations envoy Hans Grunberg ended the first visit of a UN envoy to Taiz, which has been besieged by Houthi militias for 6 years. On the contrary, the US envoy to Yemen, Tim Lindeking, continues his movements in the region to break the political stalemate that has escalated since the beginning of this year, with massive and continuous attacks of Houthi militia on Ma'rib. Grunberg, from Asij Taiz, stressed that working for peace in Yemen is an uphill battle.
Working for peace in Yemen is an uphill battle.
He reassured that Yemenis must not forget that there is always a way to break cycle of violence, and that there are always opportunities for a peaceful dialogue.
However, we should never forget that there is always a way to break the cycle of violence.
The UN official spoke of an international consensus on the need to stop escalation and violence, especially in Ma'rib, affirming that he is working underway on political and economic tracks, stressing on the need to focus on urgent matters to alleviate the suffering of the Yemeni people. However, the Yemeni government thinks that Houthi militia escalation in Ma'rib and targeting of civilians with missiles and drones require a clear and a firm international position. On the same line, US envoy Tim Lindeking was also on a first visit to the interim capital Aden. He renewed his country's solidarity and full support for the government, pointing out that his country continues to support efforts to end the war and bring peace to Yemen and alleviate suffering of Yemenis. The US delegation urged the Yemeni government to strengthen international coordination, including with the Southern Transitional Council and other groups, as division weakens all parties and only exacerbates the suffering. Until now, Houthi militia continues to reject the United Nations ceasefire plan. Meanwhile, UN and US envoys focus on pushing for a cessation of hostilities in Ma'rib. A proposed ceasefire plan is to be split into 2 phases by initiating confidence-building measures, followed by continued efforts to reach a comprehensive ceasefire agreement and return to the political track. Yet, Stockholm Agreement ceasefire in Hodeidah and Houthis' refusal to abide casts doubt on the possibility of the success of these endeavors. Finally, what is quite certain now is that poor Yemenis are alone paying the cost of this mad ugly war. With such giant efforts to be able to save them from a disaster, the answer to that question seems hard to predict.
To Adan bin Mubarak discussed with the head of the Red Cross mission the organization's programs in Yemen. The 2 sides dealt with enhancing its humanitarian part, especially in areas of great need such as Ma'rib and Al-Dala. In Adan, a car explosion killed a pregnant woman and injured others. According to medical sources, the TV correspondent Rasha Abdullah and her baby were killed by an explosive device that was placed in the car. The joint forces discovered a minefield containing individual and anti-armor mines south of Hodeidah. The military media of the joint forces reported that the minefield was planted by Houthis within homes of citizens and their farms in Hais. The military media pointed out that clearing the entire area requires time due to the Houthis shooting. Although Houthis have launched a wide-scale offensive to invade Ma'rib, the government forces backed by tribes have shown strong flexibility in defending the rebels. Dozens of rebel militants were killed and injured during those clashes. More on the story is within this report.
Non-stop military battles are waged by the government forces with the support of tribesmen against the terrorist Houthi militia. The battles take place along the southern front of Ma'rib Governorate. Ya'ara and Alamut witnessed fierce battles as a result of the militia's attempt to advance north through the sand dunes close to Al-Ma'alla mountains. The Houthi attack caused them casualties and losses in both lives and equipment.
The rebels amass huge numbers of fighters in the outskirts of Ma'rib Governorate. We thank God that there is retreat from Houthis in some positions and in some gaps. We will never go back in any plot of land until we defeat Houthis. There are large numbers of life losses among Houthis. They induce their members into the battles and do not pay attention to their lives. Their dead bodies are scattered, and Houthis do not pay attention to recover these corpses and those wounded. In the past days, there was a battle in Al-Amud and they escaped without recovering their injured or killed members.
Government forces have maneuvered Houthis and depleted their resources, causing great losses among their ranks.
The situation on the ground is currently under control. The enemy is broken. We are depleting Houthis right now. We hope that these battles will be the decisive ones. This is the end of Houthis.
According to military sources, the militia was inflicted with heavy losses over the past few days. Nearly 300 of its members were killed and more than 25 military vehicles have been destroyed. The rebels meanwhile continue to mobilize more deceived children to death without regard for their future.
Euro-Mediterranean Human Rights Monitor warned against Houthi use of judiciary as a tool to push opponents. The warning came in a comment on the militia's custody of the model Intisar al-Hamdi, along with 3 other women. It pointed out that al-Hamdi and the other women were forced to confess on fabricated charges. Houthis' human rights violations against Yemenis have crossed all social and international means. On top of these comes recruiting children as soldiers. More on the story is within this report.
Since the beginning of the war in September 2014, Yemenis have been suffering from torture, kidnapping, mines, shortage of food and torment of the citizens of Yemen, especially the children. The recruitment of child soldiers is without a doubt one of the most upsetting of the many human rights violations that have been documented during Yemen's civil war. Houthi rebels have recruited over 10,000 Yemeni children since 2014 at the beginning of the conflict. The United Nations researchers counted 211 cases of children being recruited to fight in Yemen in 2020. Of these, 134 were boys and 29 were girls recruited by Houthis. According to the Yemeni Children's Rights Organization, the Houthi militias likely run around 6,000 of summer camps where families send their children to and where all types of indoctrination by Houthis take place. Each camp accommodates at least 100 children at a time. In these camps, Houthi rebels use children as soldiers in the front lines. Children are being brainwashed. Their heads are stuffed with hatred and slogans like "Death to America." How will we ever be able to integrate them back into normal society? Some of the children join the rebels willingly, mainly because of promises of money or the chance to carry a weapon. But others described being forced into the service of Houthis, abducted from schools or homes, or coerced into joining in exchange for a family member's release from detention. Children can either be our future leaders under the best circumstances, or the world's lead terrorists when they experience the atrocities occurring like those seen in Yemen. The real problem with Houthi recruitment of children will be felt in 10 years, when a generation that has been brainwashed with hatred and enmity toward the West comes of age. The happy Yemen is no longer happy. It became the land of fear, since the Houthi militia and the war affected everything and everyone in Yemen.
Coming next, Yemenis are not only crushed by the ugly war, but also by high prices and the collapsing economy.
لا بشيء أمان. هذا هو محل استهداف الحوث الذين استهدفوا المواطنين وهم نائمين. هذا هو الصاروخ. في الساعة 4 ماشينا الضربة من الحوثيين في المخيم. هذا يعني استشهدوا أولاد عمي، هذا استشهدوا يعني أخواني كلهم، يعني شوف يعني قدام في الخيم. قدام في الخيم يعني في كل مكان، يعني رؤوسهم ما التقوش، الرأس ما التقاش، الرأس ما التقاش. الحمد لله رب
Welcome back. The United States Chargé d'Affaires to Yemen, Kathy Wesley, urged the Yemeni government to take strong measures to stabilize the economy. During her visit to Aden, the American envoy stressed that steps must be taken to ensure delivery of basic services throughout Yemen. She renewed U.S. commitment to supporting the government's efforts in building a brighter future for Yemenis. The Central Bank of Yemen announced holding an international public sale for buying and selling foreign currencies. Governor of the Central Bank set in a meeting the rules of the sale that will be held next Wednesday to ensure a high degree of transparency. Fuel crisis in Aden and Abyan affected students as they cannot go to their schools or universities due to the high transportation fares. Sources said the rise in transportation fares forced hundreds of students to drop out and abstain from attendance in classrooms. In Aden, the fifth batch of the Saudi oil grant arrived to operate power stations. The batch amounts to 60,000 loads of fuel. Later this month, other 30,000 loads of fuel are scheduled to arrive. Poor Yemenis seem to have been burdened not only with this ugly war, but with another one perhaps more brutal. That is high prices which have made everything unaffordable. People see food in stores but cannot buy it. More on the story is within this report.
Food prices have risen in Yemen in 2021 due to the conditions it's going through and the turmoil of the political situation, in addition to the emergence of the coronavirus and the pandemic that the whole world is witnessing, which led to a rise in food prices in Yemen, Sana'a, Aden, and most of the Yemeni regions. This made a large number of families complain about the poor living conditions in light of this rise. Food prices in Sana'a and Yemen also witnessed a noticeable rise, as Yemen imports 90% of its food and consumer demand. Many food and consumer products were affected by the wave of crazy high prices that swept the Yemeni market. Salaries were cut off in the Houthi coup militia's areas of control for more than 2 years, and the Houthis rejected a government offer in 2016 to deposit all the revenues they receive at the headquarters of the Central Bank of Yemen in the temporary capital Aden, in return for disbursing the salaries of employees in their areas. The prices of some foodstuffs in the city of Sana'a and the areas under the control of the Houthi coup militia increased between 30 to 40%. while the prices of other foodstuffs increased by more than 3 times their price. The price of one bag of flour, a package of 50 kilos, reached 14,000 Yemeni riyals, which is equivalent to $22, after it was previously sold at a price of 10,000 riyals, while the price of a gallon of oil, 20 liters, reached 21,500 riyals, which is equivalent to $36, after that was being sold for $13. The United Nations stated that the conflict in Yemen 6 years ago has left at least 24.1 million people in need of humanitarian assistance, including 12.3 million children and 3.7 million internally displaced people. The United Nations indicated that about 70% of the population is facing the risk of hunger in a country that's already among the most food insecure countries in the world. Merchants in Sana'a attributed the reasons for the rise in prices to the Houthis imposing new taxes and royalties under various names, which burdened the citizen and the merchant at the same time, as well as the high prices of oil derivatives, which in turn is reflected in the wages of transporting foodstuffs. In a recent report, the World Bank said that the conflict has devastated the national economy, with GDP halving since 2015, pushing more than 80% of the total population below the poverty line. High prices, black market, and the unpaid salaries of Yemenis are all factors affecting their life on a daily basis and doubling their pain more and more. All of this because of these Irani-backed Houthi militia who does nothing but ruin, destroy, and add pain to all Yemenis.
The National Committee Against Coronavirus announced 8 new cases of the COVID-19 in 3 governorates. Also, 6 deaths were recorded in 4 governorates. The total confirmed cases are 9,891, including 1,915 deaths and 6,571 cases of recovery. Here's a reminder of the main headlines. The UN and the U.S. Special Envoys are in Yemen to seek ceasefire and push for peace. The joint forces uncover new Houthi minefield to the south of Hodeidah. Houthi rebels continue to recruit children and send them to war fronts. This is the end of the news. Thank you for watching.